Good evening and welcome to this episode of The Good, The Bad and The Ugly, the Franchise Tag Podcast. I am back with James and Johnny for another Tuesday night show. I'm a little bit more alive, gentlemen, than I was last night for the episode that we did. I got in about 20 minutes before the show started on very little to no sleep. I stayed up in the late game in Germany, which finished at 6 a.m. Had to be back up at 10 to go and pack and get to the airport. So at least I'm a little bit more alive after Munich. But did you guys watch the Germany game on the telly? How did it come across?
Yeah, loved the game. It was, I think, a lot better than I expected. I think I'm sure we're going to come on to the Giants' offensive issues, but yeah, two stud running backs that have now entered the league. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. Chuba Hubbard having a day after his big contract, and Bryce Young, coming back. He's looking a lot better than he did start of the year. So yeah, Panthers obviously getting the dub, but it seemed a good atmosphere, and I think we got a better spectacle than we were expecting.
I think that's very right. James was just saying off there that it would be a game that he wouldn't rush back to see again, but was actually quite pleasantly pleased with what happened on the telly at the time. Is that correct, James?
Yeah, that's fair assessment. I think. You're not going to put it in the all-time classic column or anything like that. It's not, it's not Rams Chiefs of years gone by or anything like that. But it was what it was, and like Johnny said, better than we expected. So, great atmosphere that makes these international games, even when the games aren't great. You can feel the vibe through the TV and everything else. It was really good atmosphere, really good, product that Germany have put out the last few seasons, I think. So long may that continue. And some interesting comments from Big Raj about future international games as well. Maybe in the Emerald Isle soon. I think that could be good.
That's exactly what I was going to go on to in the quickfire news. So we're definitely on the right track tonight. As I say, quickfire news: the Carolina Panthers beating the New York Giants in overtime. We did review the game in a bit more detail last night on our Monday show. It finishes the international series for this year. It's been a fantastic time in the UK and Germany. Again, very thankful we got the opportunity to do all this sort of stuff, and like to thank everyone at the NFL for allowing us to be in Germany. Thank you to all the people I met over the weekend who are just fantastic guys who are really doing some really, really great work in the amateur and the mainstream NFL podcast scene and television script scene. Like a bunch of lovely people, and it's certainly a massive privilege to be able to do stuff like that. So again, thank you. But James is right. It was sort of reported in Germany, a bit tongue in cheek, but it was don't believe, what was the exact quote? You shouldn't believe rumors most of the time, but this was one you should believe, and that was for Berlin. So they are aiming to go up to 8 games in 2025. That may include Berlin and it may include Dublin. So the rumors go. So definitely keep your eyes and ears on that. I've already seen a few game predictions for what is going to be in London next year. Obviously nothing in concrete, but that certainly starts to get the pot stirring of where things may be. And of course, we have Madrid in Spain next year as well, which should be great fun. NFL news today, though: Shane Waldron, offensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, has been removed after a very dismal display by the Bears throughout the whole of this season. So he is now gone. They are in the hunt for a new offensive coordinator. They have promoted internally one of their guys, but it's him and the Getsy geezer from over at the Raiders, whose name is Luke Getsy. I'm pretty sure I always get his name wrong the first time. But we should begin with the good this evening, and we're going to talk about it's not very often on these short sorts of shows that people give love to the kickers. I feel like they're the forgotten guy. You've got Pat McAfee's of this world who obviously are very big on the punters and the kickers, and they provide a lot of positive reinforcement for it. But I feel like the general John on the street, like us guys are, you don't hear enough about the kickers. So we're going to give the good section tonight to Jake Bates, who kicked the game-winning field goal for the Detroit Lions in their 26-23 win over the Houston Texans. The 25-year-old kicker who had made the 44-yard winning goal in Week 7 to beat the Vikings, has also did 2 field goals, which were 50-plus yards against the Houston Texans. And James, I mean, what a story this young man has. I don't know how much you've sort of researched into him since we sort of said was going to be a topic, because, you know, kickers are kicker to some people. I mean, you know, outside of the Tuckers of this world, a lot of them are a name with names, but, you know, maybe people don't really know who they are, I suppose. Whereas this fine young gentleman is getting a lot of praise in the media in the last 24 hours. Well, 48 hours now.
Yeah, massively so. And he's been rock solid all season. And yeah, really, really strange, unusual background and way into the NFL this time around. You know, started out playing soccer, and, you know, then made a switch to playing American football, but only kicked kickoffs for like a couple of years in college. And, you know, his progression from there is, you know, we've seen soccer players before, if you know, follow him on like Instagram or whatever else, like kicking, you know, 60 odd yarders and everything else, but like under absolutely no pressure, just on an empty field in perfect conditions and everything else. So a lot of soccer players obviously think that they've got this in the bag. So, you know, cut by the Texans as well. So obviously there's a little bit of retribution for him there this week. And obviously I don't think the Texans are going to say that they are like missing him or anything. They're not in a particularly bad kicker situation either, but, you know, made his name in the UFL, signed in December before the season started. He played for the Michigan Panthers, I believe they were called. And he was absolutely tearing it up in that league, multiple 60-yarders. And then he signed his contract with the Lions, but wasn't the number one guy. You know, Michael Badgley was still there and then got an injury in pre-season. So Bates won the sort of like internal competition that they had there. And apparently there were 77 UFL guys made on rosters in the pre-season, and he is one of only 2 that made it. And I don't know the other guy's name. I'm really sorry to the other guy. But
what's really bad is I have that wrote down too, and I didn't write the name of him.
I feel really awful. But yeah, I mean, the Lions have come up as this really scrappy, like hit them hard, take you know, really sort of uppercut punch kind of team, and his story kind of fits in with the sort of vibe that they feel like they've got going on. This sort of scrappy guy who is saying himself like he was a brick salesman in Texas, in Houston, because after he got cut by the Texans, and he just sort of didn't know what to do with himself and thought football was done for, and now he's absolutely balling. And, you know, long may it continue, but the kicking game is the most fickle position on any NFL team. You know, you've only got to miss 1 or 2 high profile ones and that can be you done. So obviously I'm sure he won't be resting on his laurels or anything like that, but he seems to be in the right place, you know, the right kind of guy behind him. Coach wise, with Dan Campbell, just likes to big everyone up no matter who they are or where they've come from. In fact, I think he loves the guys who've got the scrappy story. Do you know what I mean? That they're his guys. They're the guys that he wants in his locker room, who are gonna, you know, scrape and claw at every opportunity. So awesome for him. Love his story. There's a lot of good stories in the NFL, but this is definitely one of the better ones. And big up. Let's big up the kickers a little bit more often if we can. We're quick to criticize, but don't put the love on them as often as we should do. And these are guys that win massive games way more regularly than I think they're given credit for. So
he's actually from I've probably not pronounced this correctly, from Tomball, Texas, which is actually northwest of Houston. So he's a local Houston kid as well. So, you know, kicking this winning field goal against his home team he probably supported as a child as well, is a pretty great thing. Yeah, he worked for Acme Bricks, which were a brick manufacturer.
That's a Warner Brothers company, surely.
Well, yeah, indeed. But that was like, you know, and he also attended Arkansas and then formerly of Texas State as well. He actually never attempted a field goal in college. never kicked a field goal in college, and
It's insane.
And went to the UFL and made a 64-yard field goal, and that was the longest in UFL history and any predecessor league to that as well. So, guy can kick the ball. Let's be honest. I mean, and he's yet to miss his season, Johnny. Do you think we're going to get more as we progress with things like the player pathway? And Jordan Mailata, the left tackle at the Philadelphia Eagles, played rugby from Australia, obviously. We have our own pathway, and with the European guys as well as the international guys, obviously Lewis Rees-Zammit, the rugby players coming this year. Obviously, he's on the practice squad at the Jags. Do you think that there may be a bit of a progression for potentially more people that are in one sport, or maybe that sport was what they were going to do and then went into the NFL? Because obviously, famously, we have like people like Kyler Murray, who was like slated to be like a number one draft pick in baseball, and then became the number one pick in the NFL, which a lot of Antonio Gates was like very, very close to being a high-end basketball player. Do you think we're going to see maybe more and more of that, especially with like soccer/football, with the European pathway and the international pathway?
Yeah, I think we definitely.
And sorry to interrupt as well with the Irish guy. We've seen a lot of the Irish guys being punters and everything like that in a minute, aren't we? As well.
Yeah, there's been I think about 3 or 4 in the last 12 months who have been either from an international background or from a previous sport background, and obviously kicking obviously soccer being a predominantly kicking sport, that's obviously going to help with any sort of kicking sort of credentials in the NFL. And these guys are, kicking in general in the NFL is just if we look at it even 10-20 years ago, the difference in records consistently being challenged and broken. The 50-yarders nowadays are expected field goals, which is I think would have been unheard of 20 years ago. So yeah, I think we're gonna see more players, particularly in the kicking punting position. Obviously, historically, we've had the likes of Morten Andersen, Gary Anderson, the South African as well, and others. This is obviously the position that I think the talent is most resonates with other sports, football, rugby, obviously. But yeah, and it's a great story for Jay Bates, particularly his background and the adversity I suppose he's faced in his journey to the Lions. He stepped up when his team needed him most. Obviously, the Lions, that's the sign of a great team. Is when the Lions. If you look at obviously all the stats around Jared Goff and the yards against the Texans, they should have lost that game, and they had to rely on a very inexperienced but good kicker to bail them out. So yeah, all for Jake Bates, and I hope he continues to and has a very, very long and prosperous career in the NFL, because like James said, it's a position which likes to change. So yeah, it's a great moment for him, and I'm sure him and his family and obviously the coaching staff. Obviously the game ball given to him, I think a couple of times now by Dan Campbell. It must be a really, really good thing for him and for the locker room.
Let's crack on to the bad of this week. And unfortunately, we're going back in time to a topic we just spoke about minutes ago, and that is the New York Giants that did lose again in Munich, Germany. Lost 20-17, like we said, in overtime against the Panthers. We're going to talk a little bit about how they're playing at the minute, and also just about what the aims are now for this point of the season. Because Johnny, when I was there, a big thing that everyone was saying in the stadium, you could tell, is why don't we bench Daniel Jones now? Why don't we just bench Daniel Jones now? And I mean, I am repeating myself a little bit from yesterday's show, but this is how things go sometimes when you have a big game like that abroad. But I could not understand why that opinion would be the case, because why? Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito, what are they going to bring to the table? What have we seen from them that is different to Daniel Jones? And at this point, when you've got this many wins, what what would be the point of that? What do you think to that? Because there was a lot of people saying that, and I was a bit like, I don't get why.
I think there's a lot of reasons, and fundamentally is that Daniel Jones has been probably the worst quarterback in the NFL so far this season. I think playing him and risking him getting injured, as bad as it sounds, risks them, perhaps having to pay him, the full entirety of his contract. I unfortunately think that Daniel Jones has, is about to play his last snap for the Giants. They've obviously got the bye this week, and Brian Dable's been very clear that there are going to be some, or they're going to consider, and there are going to be some changes. This is a coach who, I think, despite having a good fortune first year or so, is now very much on the hot seat. He's got to try and win football games, and Daniel Jones is not putting them in a great position. But this goes further than the player, the head coach. The Giants are, have lost the most games of any franchise in the NFL, I think, since 2016, 2017. They consistently get top decisions wrong. If you look at the draft classes over the last 2-3 years, okay, we obviously can't take into consideration this year, but look at the amount of receivers that they've drafted quite highly up, and how productive these guys are. High picks like Evan Neal. I even think Thibodeau is fairly overrated. I think they are, the general manager is obviously we've spoken a lot on this podcast as well about Saquon leaving, and that decision. And I think they're a franchise which has, over the last few years, not got anything right. And I think a big chunk of that, unfortunately, is Daniel Jones's contract. I mean, even after after that 1 year, I think it was it 2022 season where Jones, stepped up, and the Giants dragged themselves into the playoffs. They got a playoff win against the Vikings.
They went 9-7 that year, and that was the year that Daboll won the head coach of the year.
Exactly, head coach of the year. Daniel Jones is seemingly back. He's been given time to develop, but not anymore. Unfortunately, I think it's well and truly over for Jones. What do they do? Coming to the draft, they're going to be picking in the top 5 at this rate. You take a quarterback then, or is it all about selling off your assets? So some of the big players and trying to rebuild a little bit. There's obviously a certain Manning who will potentially be available the year after. If you try and chase him a little bit and focus on other areas, I don't know. I just feel that the Giants are a real dumpster truck, unfortunately, and I largely blame the decision making from the top. And fundamentally, the decision to keep Daniel Jones has ultimately cost them, a fair few years in development and progressing this team. Because as I say, there are good players around him, particularly on defense. I think they've got a good defense when they're playing well. But I think there's got to be major changes for the Giants this off season.
So we don't really like to say the T word on this podcast, James, but I mean, you look at it now, they're at the minute of the second pick at 2-8. There's still 4 other teams with 2 wins, and there's 6 teams with 3 wins. But when you look at their schedule, if I can just get the schedule up here for the Giants, they are hosting Tampa Bay, at Dallas, hosting New Orleans, hosting Ravens, at Atlanta, hosting the Colts, at the Eagles. I mean, what is there, potentially 1 win in there? 2 wins, maybe. That would be Dallas and New Orleans. That would be the only ones I would see them as maybe having a chance at winning there. But at that point, you could come off the bye week, you lose to Tampa Bay, you go 2-9. At that point, aren't you like, well, we're not fighting for anything here. We're fighting for wins. Do you think the organisation may feel like they have a responsibility to change something, whether that bench Jones or get rid of the coach or something like that? But really, there is an underlying of like, but we don't really want to win a game for the rest of the year because we could get such a high draft pick and potentially take a quarterback.
Yeah, this is going to be a really difficult balancing act now Mara's come out and said that he doesn't anticipate making any changes during the season or in the off season with regards to Daboll and Joe Schoen. And I would be so surprised if those two guys were there at the end of the year. It feels like this is just going to be a complete wipeout. Get somebody else in, draft somebody at quarterback and see what you can do from there. If Daboll is to stay, I don't think Daboll's a bad head coach. I think bad decisions have been made above him. But how does Daboll go about this now? So you're saying about benching Daniel Jones, and you were saying why. Well, one reason why maybe you don't is if you are going for the T word that we don't like, that he's playing so badly that you might just want to carry on keeping playing badly.
That's my argument. And you're paying him loads of money, so you might as well pay him loads of money to pay badly if you want the high draft pick.
Yeah. Where are you going to move him to? I mean, I don't know who would want him. Obviously, there might be that sort of situation whereby he moves and does a Darnold and sits and then comes back and is regenerated, and he's still got good legs and stuff. He can still move about. He's a big guy, and it's not that his arm is terrible. It's strong. There are qualities there to like, but maybe it's just like when he first went there, everybody said in this New York market's going to eat you alive, and he's a really sort of quiet, low-key guy, and he just doesn't seem to fit. But Daboll's got to try and keep the locker room if he wants to stay. So what do? Do you address the T word in the room and just sort of acknowledge it wholeheartedly and go, look, this is what we're doing now. This is going to be the plan. We'll reset, we'll reboot, we'll go again, and I'll make sure that I build something more competitive next year, and we'll get back on track? Or does he try and win, because that's the only way to keep the locker room happy, by trying as hard as you can, even if obviously it only accumulates 2 more wins for the rest of the year, and guys can see that he's trying, and I don't know. Only really the owner can address the team and say, look, now I want you guys to carry on sucking for the rest of the year, because I just need to reset this whole thing, and I need as much draft capital as we can, and let's see if we can get that number 1 pick. We'll be up there anyway. Maybe we can trade into it, but there's going to be a few teams that are going to want to do that. I could see my team being one of them as well, because they're going to be there or thereabouts. So it's going to be quite competitive in a not wholly rich QB draft class. I think 2, maybe 3 guys at the most I can only see going first round at the moment. But obviously desperation kicks in, and a few more go. But I don't know. It just feels like bad decision making at the top for years now, and that's got to change. And maybe Daboll can cling on to his job, but I don't know if Joe Schoen can. He's the guy who I would be, if I'm in that organization at the moment. He is if I'm him, I've got half my stuff in a box, just sort of squirreled away in the cupboard, just in case they give me the boot and they want to get out of there double time. It's a really toxic market as well. Once it starts going badly, the New York market, you don't get a lot of leeway, and they expect wins. They expect, to be, because they are that storied franchise, if you like, especially in that area. They expect results, and they expect them quickly. And it looked like Daboll was on the right track in his first year with Daniel Jones, and it fell apart really quickly. And I think, was it so it wasn't after the first year, it was the second year that they then gave Daniel Jones the contract, and everybody was just scratching their heads then, and you could see it wasn't working. And I'd love to know who exactly that decision fell to and who signed that off, because that felt like the first nail in the coffin for someone. And again, I think that's going to be predominantly Joe Schoen. So I expect changes, even though Mara's saying not. I think that's perhaps just a bit of bravado. He's probably, I mean, he has changed a lot recently as well, and he's been quite open in saying, I don't like too much change. I want to try and keep consistency. That is how good franchises build. But when it ain't working, what else do you do?
I think the biggest thing will be that Daboll never picks Daniel Jones. That's always going to be a big thing. Yeah. That's always going to be a thing of what maybe is sort of his armor at the minute is like, I didn't pick a lot of these players, or I wasn't here when this happened. And so, you can probably get away with that a little bit to a certain extent, but at the same time, you've got to take that responsibility. And it's excuse me, sorry. It's a very.
Sorry, in games where they started different QBs over the last couple of years, they had Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito. He still went 5-6. It's not like his record with other guys has been amazing either. I mean, I know that there are guys like DeVito was a no-name guy when he started, and he was a bit of he's still got that cult hero status there, but he isn't. He might get the fan base going for a little while, but he's not like setting the world on fire. And Tyrod Taylor was Tyrod Taylor. You knew what he was, very safe, very middle of the road. So 5-6 with those guys. Daboll's supposed to be came in as this really offensive-minded guy, and you're just not seeing a lot of that either. So I don't. The reasons for keeping Daboll are consistency. And then after that, I'm not seeing a lot else, because stylistically on the field, the product they're putting out there visually feels really, really far behind everywhere else.
Well, speaking of a product that feels visually not great, we're going to go to the ugly tonight and stay in the vision as well. And that is with the Dallas Cowboys, who were Dakless in their loss against the Philadelphia Eagles. I hope I didn't see that too quickly where it may have sounded like something else. This franchise is in disarray, isn't it? It's in disarray, and we're going to maybe not talk about really what they're currently like, but what their future is going to look like. But, when your offense only puts up 146 total yards, 49 passing yards, 97 rushing yards against this Eagles team who, they are getting better, this Eagles team, but a lot of people have said in the first place that they're not the strongest Eagles team at the minute, James. But, let's talk more about this whole franchise as a whole at the minute in this season. The 24th best offense, 31st in rushing yards, 32nd in rushing touchdowns, and then on the defensive side, 31st in rushing touchdowns, 27th in rushing yards, 22nd in passing touchdowns. Like this is a real big fall from grace at the minute. In my brain, they have two players. And that's it.
Wow, that's bold. Which two?
Cooper Rush and Micah and CD.
Yeah.
I don't see where else you can be positive about this team in any area.
No, I mean, they've had good stories over the last few years in different positions at cornerback with Diggs and with Deron Bland and everything else, but that's sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit. Look, I was watching a clip from Rex Ryan the other day, and he was like, the Cowboys need somebody who understands the Cowboys at head coach. Mike McCarthy, are we all pretty confident saying Mike McCarthy's done? This is it. And sorry, Mike. Thanks, but no thanks. See you later. So they're going to be making a coaching change, and he was bigging up getting Deion Sanders in. And this is Rex Ryan, who likes to come.
Ryan said that.
Yeah, he likes to come out with crazy statements, and I know that. But he was like, he understands the Cowboys. He understands what that franchise is. He understands what they're about. He understands how the sort of glitz and glamour and everything is part of it. And he understands Jerry Jones and yada yada yada. But it's really hard because I don't feel as though the Cowboys need more spotlight. The Cowboys need a guy who is a solid offensive-minded head coach, and they just don't necessarily need a Deion Sanders who has done good work where he's been, but I don't know if he's a great head coach, because the thing for Sanders for me is that when he goes to a team, high school, college, whatever, better players will go there because he's there. But that ain't going to transition into the NFL. You wouldn't move to Dallas and move to the Cowboys because Deion Sanders was there as head coach, this big question mark guy. And you've got Dak, you are kind of stuck with Dak because he signed this contract. So I've seen people calling for drafting a new QB. Well, that seems ridiculous at the moment. Other people would take Dak's contract on. I'm not necessarily saying that they wouldn't. It's just such a massive expense, what they've given him so recently, to then go, nah, you're not our guy. Jerry Jones likes him, and Jerry Jones gets the final say. So they need to make it. They're going to make a change at head coach. I wouldn't go looking at the college guys at the moment. I'd be looking in the league, and I'd be looking at who are the best offensive teams at the moment, who's got the best output, and I'd be looking at, the Texans and Slowick and the Lions, and there are other teams around the league.
You don't think, you were saying about a solid-minded offensive head coach. When you said solid-minded, I thought you were going to say solid-minded, someone that could stand up to him, and defensive head coach being Bill Belichick. And I'm not. That's not me taking the mick. Honestly, that's what I thought you were going to say. Because actually, the two coaches who've had the most success at Dallas have been the ones that have challenged Jerry in Bill Parcells and Jimmy Johnson. And that Bill did. Now, I don't know. It's a headline. Obviously, a lot of people have been speaking about Bill going back into coaching. I don't think he will personally, but
I'm not convinced.
You're not convinced by that then, no?
No. I think he's got great gigs at the moment, and it's not that I think he wouldn't want to get back into coaching maybe at some point. But I can't see why Bill Belichick would want to go and work for Jerry Jones. Belichick wants to be the guy in control, and Jerry Jones isn't gonna relinquish any. We've seen that he's so stubborn. You see the clip with CD this week, missing the catch in the end zone, and he's like, I couldn't see a thing. And he's like, would you want a curtain on that window? And he's like, yes, 1,000%. And Jerry Jones is like, oh, well, it's not like we don't know where the sun's going to be in our own stadium. Let's just tear the whole thing down and build it to start again and make it more friendly for the players and stuff. But like a cover wouldn't be like the worst thing, but the worst idea. Leave it open for the opposition and close it for your own team if you want to be a knob about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's just so stubborn, and I just don't know why a Bill Belichick would want to go and work there. It seems crazy to me, given what we know about Belichick and how much he likes to control an organization. So I think you get a young guy in, and you go in a different way than you've gone before. You had the opportunity before you hired Mike McCarthy to go young. He's not really been his way. So maybe it's time to turn face and do something different. And there's a lot of potential on that team. It wouldn't take a lot to get that offense humming. Obviously, you've got to get players fit and everything else. But they've just missed. They've just missed in big ways. They missed on Derrick Henry, like we couldn't afford $6 million and whatever else. And Jerry Jones is like the Scrooge McDuck of the NFL. He's just got like cash to burn. I'm sure he has. I'm sure he goes swimming in it. It's just crazy to me. Like, just do the right thing. Do the things that will get. It'll be funny because when Jerry Jones steps down and somebody else takes over and relinquishes that control and gives it to like to a proper, a properly football-minded guy in the right positions below him. I mean, you'll see this franchise turn itself around again pretty quickly. But it's just so long in the tooth and so stubborn that I just can't see that happening.
George, let's spin it into a different phase of like Johnny, not just sort of like getting maybe younger head coach and stuff like that, but we also got to look at like the franchise and the team as a whole. I mean, when you look at it, CeeDee Lamb, big contract, Dak Prescott, big contract, Trayvon Diggs, big contract, Terrence Steele, Tyler Guyton's not on a huge, crazy amount of money, but DeMarcus Lawrence, big money. Brandon Cooks, big money. Zach Martin, big money. Trey Lance is coming to sort of the end of his big money. You've got a lot of players who are coming up this year, notably DeMarcus Lawrence, Brandon Cooks, Zach Martin. Also Adigizua, Chauncey Golston, Eric Kendricks. Some of these guys are young a bit. I mean, Zeke as well. I did that. He's going to be coming back. Like you look at that, and then you look at also, the 23rd in cap space currently in 2025, 17th in cap space currently in 2026. Their draft capital they're currently the 11th pick, but 5 other teams have 3 wins. They've got 1 in the 2nd round, 1 in the 3rd round, 4 picks in the 5th round, weirdly, and 2 picks in the 6th round. Like, it's the aim for this offseason got to be, we need to get cheaper and younger. If we're going to pay our quarterback, we've got to be utilizing the draft more and getting guys cheaper and getting younger guys around him and being more proactive with their money. Because at the minute, for me, DeMarcus Lawrence doesn't get re-signed. Brandon Cooks doesn't get re-signed. I think Zach Martin has been a tremendous guard, but I think that's sort of going away now. He's gone for me. People like Odigizua, 22, admittedly, been pretty decent. I'd probably keep him around. And also the creeping one, which is Micah Parsons, which is coming up very soon as well. And he's going to want to get paid early, and he's going to want to be paid the top money in the NFL. So they're going to need to get cheaper. They've got to get cheaper, haven't they?
100%. But I mean, Jerry's sending mixed signals by trading a 4th rounder for Jonathan Mingo, who's done absolutely next to nothing in the NFL. I genuinely don't know where this franchise goes, unfortunately, with Jerry Jones. I saw that exact clip that James referenced from Rex Ryan, and I think he spoke a lot of truth. Like, we've seen over the last couple of years these real, like, out there leaders like Dan Campbell, not necessarily the best coaches in the NFL, but people that can just rally a locker room. And I think if anywhere needs that, it is Dallas, because they are, they're the biggest franchise. The most pressure on them. They're America's team. They need someone to galvanize, because I'm sorry, I just don't. I said in the offseason that Dak has his moments. I think he's a good quarterback, but I don't think he is the leader that the Cowboys need. And I think, unfortunately, until he goes, obviously he's going to be sticking around. He's obviously out for the rest of the season, but he's going to be sticking around for a fair amount of time. I just don't know where this team goes. And to exactly your point, they've got to pay Micah Parsons, who will become the most expensive defensive player of all time. It's really, really difficult to see where they go. For me, I think they go for that sort of leader rather than someone young. I think Mike Vrabel would be an absolute steal going into the Cowboys. And then exactly what you say, I think get rid of the sort of old guard. They started doing that with their offensive line, but really start to rebuild in those sort of trench positions. I don't know. I think someone like Vrabel can get the run game going, which has been obviously a huge disappointment for the Cowboys over the last few years. If they can start somewhere, then I think it really has to be in the trenches. And yeah, I think he could be someone that balances that relationship with Jerry Jones quite well. He's a proper football guy, and I think he will be itching a bit to get back into coaching after a disappointed end to his time in Tennessee. It's really difficult. Jerry Jones is obviously he's always an optimist, but I'm really struggling with this Cowboys team. I have been for the last few years, and I think this year, with injuries, and I think people could just see it a mile off when Dak got that contract. It's just come crashing down all of a sudden. So yeah, hard to see where they go from here, but they will have some. They'll have a high draft pick, I think, next year. So what they choose to do with that will be very, very interesting.
On to the final section of our evening. Hot seat, cold throne. very quick section we like to do. Who's the hot seat for? Who is in trouble? And who's sitting on that ice cold throne watching over his kingdom? We'll start with the cold throne this evening because I'm going to go first because the guy sitting on the throne with an airplane going past someone's house, and I don't know which house it is. It was, for me, your man Russell Wilson, 3-0, undefeated with the Pittsburgh Steelers, thrown for 6 touchdowns, rushed for 1 so far since his glorious return, only 1 interception, beat the Washington Commanders this weekend. He's never lost it. It was just simmering underneath a load of rubbish that he was having to deal with in other situations. The guy's returned.
Okay. I don't know what to say. Oh my god!
You don't need to respond. You just need to bask in his glory. That's what you need to do. Go on, James. Who's on your cold throne?
Kyler Murray this week, beating the Jets. I think he's played exceptionally well the majority of the year. If there's another QB giving Lamar Jackson any worry at MVP at the moment, I think it's Kyler Murray. He's scored, just absolutely tore up the Jets at the weekend. Sorry, Johnny. Sorry, I know I do feel a bit bad about this, but 22 of 24, 266. He's looking as fast and as twitchy as he ever has, and he's just playing at an elite level at the moment, and he looks well coached, he looks well balanced. He's about to, I think he's going into his bye week this week, and then they play Seattle after that, so that'll be an interesting game for them. But I think he's been playing so well at the moment, and this week it's quite a pressure game. They've had a strange record, and nobody expected a lot from him this off season. But he's just picked this team up on his shoulders, which it probably hasn't had to go very far. Admittedly, he's only like 4 foot and nothing tall. But he's raised this team's level well above and beyond what anybody thought. So yeah, him for me this week.
Johnny, who's sitting on that throne for you? Is he wearing black and yellow?
He's not. He's wearing blue, and I think they played in blue and black actually the weekend. It's old Chubba Hubbard after a big contract extension. Someone who has come out of nowhere, I think, in the last 12 to 18 months. A low draft pick. It's come out. He's got the bag. He's got a huge contract as a sort of a running back that we didn't really expect to do too much in the NFL. Had a really good day in Germany. Put his name on the map. So long may it continue for Hubbard and the improving Panthers team as well. Obviously they're not good still, but Bryce and I think the D line looking a little bit better. So things are on the up in Carolina.
On the up in Carolina, they are on the up as well of Kyler Murray, and they're letting Russ cook. Hot seat. Who's on your hot seat, Johnny?
Well, it's not looking good in the windy city of Chicago, is it? Matt Eberflus, obviously, we saw Shane Waldron has left his position as offensive coordinator for the Bears. It is a disaster with Caleb Williams seemingly regressing the season. Obviously, it's very early days, but the offense in Chicago is looking very bad. The locker room seems to have gone. The offensive line, there was a clip of them not picking up Caleb Williams after a sack. It just looks disorientated, and that's on the coaching staff. Waldron gone. Is Eberflus going to follow? I think there's major changes coming in the offseason after what has been a terrible season so far for the Bears.
Terrible season so far. James, who's sitting on that hot seat?
Well, this is more of a long-term projection, but I think Sam Darnold is moving that way. It's just started struggling these last few weeks. He's looking a little bit more like the Sam Darnold of old. Scrappy win over the Jags this weekend, and I understand they still got the win, but he was 24 of 38 for 240, which sounds okay. Failed to throw a touchdown, really bad decision making, turnovers, 3 interceptions, if I remember correctly. And I think I saw he's thrown at least 1 now in 7 of his last 9 games. And he's just, he started out flying, and there's going to be questions, now going into the off season, if this kind of form continues, where he looked to be a nailed on starter for someone next year, he's now just looking like that mid-level backup guy that we sort of have come to know from him. There's still time to pick it up, but I don't know if we've just sort of regressed back into the norm with Sam Darnold now.
The shine is starting to dull. I can understand where you're coming from with that one. My hot seat is a double header, a little bit of a left-footed one, this one as well. I've gone for Casey Rogers and Larry Foote, the defensive coordinators for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Wow.
Another loss for the Buccaneers, who's the defense this year, statistically, terribly poor this year. I know they're young, they're quite, young defense now, but, they were so dominant some years ago. And it just feels like, they were once this sort of powerhouse unit and, got to the Super Bowl, won it. I know it was under a different era, a different time, but like, I just feel like it's taken a big step back, and they've got some names on that defense as well. And I just don't think it was. They've only 2 times this season have they kept teams to under 20 points. So again, I'm not saying they're both going to get, gone next week. I think mine's a little bit like James. It might be a long-term future thing. So yeah, you might as well keep your eyes peeled for that. James, Johnny, thank you very much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching and liking and subscribing on our YouTube and on our social media stuff as well. We have the college show out in the next couple of days, as well as our betting show at the weekend. And again, thank you to everyone in Munich who we spoke to and made friends with and experienced just fun NFL stuff with. So long may it continue. 8 games internationally next year. Ooh, my wallet's going to be empty. Until then, have a good rest of your week.